You know, there's something rather peculiar that happens when one begins to awaken. At first, it seems like the most extraordinary discovery, as if someone had drawn back a curtain and you suddenly realize that life, which you've been taking so seriously, is really more of a cosmic play. You see through the game. The masks fall away. The chatter of the mind that once ran your life begins to quiet, and for a moment, there's this dazzling silence. But then, rather unexpectedly, there comes a feeling that can only be described as a kind of holy loneliness. It's not sadness in the ordinary sense. It's not despair. It's more like the quiet that follows the sound of the orchestra after the last note has faded that moment, when you can still feel the music, but the players have all gone home. You see, when you awaken, you don't just wake up from the world, you wake up out of it. You begin to realize that so much of what people call living is really a form of sleepwalking, running in circles, chasing echoes, worshipping shadows, and suddenly you find you can't play those games quite the same way anymore. The conversations that once thrilled you now sound like echoes in a cave. The ambitions that once drove you now seem curiously hollow. And the people around you, good people, kind people, look at you with puzzled eyes because they can sense something has shifted, but they can't quite name it. And so you begin to drift, not by choice, but by gravity. You're not rejecting the world, you're simply no longer hypnotized by it. The spell has broken. You start to see that most of what you called love, success, importance, was a magnificent dream, vivid, emotional, even beautiful, but still a dream. And this is where the loneliness creeps in. Because now you can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't pretend to be asleep when you've already tasted waking. You find yourself in a curious place between two worlds, the world of names and roles and identities, and the world of pure being. And for a time, you belong to neither. You look at the world and it feels distant, almost translucent, like a photograph of a life you once lived. You begin to understand that this loneliness is not punishment, it is purification. It is the space between dying and being reborn. You're shedding an old skin, and it's tender work. The ego, that busy little narrator that used to define your every move, is dissolving. And without it, there's silence. But oh, how unfamiliar silence can feel when you've spent a lifetime mistaking noise for comfort. You start to sense that this loneliness is not really yours, it's the loneliness of consciousness itself, realizing it has been pretending to be separate. The ache of the wave, remembering it was always the ocean. And so you stand there like someone who's woken up in the middle of a masquerade ball, surrounded by dancers who don't know the masks are masks. You can still smile, still move with the rhythm, still laugh with the others, but somewhere inside you know the truth. The dance floor and the dancer are one. This is the first paradox of awakening, that in seeing the unity of all things, you may at first feel utterly alone, because for the first time there is no other to lean on, no illusion to hide behind, no comforting story to tell yourself. But stay with it, for that loneliness is not a void, it's the clearing. It's the open space in which love, the real kind, not the bargaining sort, will soon begin to bloom. And perhaps, just perhaps, what we call loneliness is nothing more than life inviting us back to intimacy with itself. You see, before awakening, most of us were taught a very curious thing about love. We were taught to chase it, to find it, to hold on to it as though it were some delicate, vanishing treasure. And in that chase, we turned love into a kind of contract, a polite arrangement between two frightened egos who promised to keep each other from feeling alone. Now, that sounds terribly cynical, but it isn't meant to be. It's simply how we've been conditioned. From the beginning, we are told that to be complete, we must find our other half. What a strange idea that the universe, vast and infinite, somehow divided you in two, and that your job is to wander about searching for the missing piece. And so we look for love the way a merchant hunts for a bargain. We scan faces, compare personalities, audition one another for roles in the great drama of my life. And when we find someone who fits our script, we fall in love, or at least we fall into the idea of it. But what we really love is the reflection of ourselves we see glimmering in the eyes of another. We fall in love with the image, not the person. We fall in love with how we feel around them, validated, admired, desired. And that's not love, that's a mirror trick. The ego, that splendid little illusion of separateness, uses love as its favorite disguise. It says, I need you because I love you, when what it truly means is, I love the way you make me feel about myself. And when that feeling fades, as it must, when the mirror no longer flatters us, when the reflection turns dull or difficult, we say the love is gone. But love cannot go. Only the reflection disappears. And with it, the ego's fascination. You see, the ego treats love like ownership. It says, you are mine. But have you noticed, everything the ego calls mine eventually becomes a source of suffering. My house, my reputation, my partner, my truth. Every mine carries within it the seed of loss, because ownership creates fear, the fear of losing what was never yours to begin with. And yet, how passionately we defend our illusions. We write songs about eternal love, build temples to it, make vows to preserve it all while knowing that the very nature of life is change. And so our love, built upon possession, trembles before time. The irony, of course, is that what we seek through ownership is precisely what ownership destroys. We cling to love in order to feel safe. But love, real love, is freedom, not safety. It's a fire that refuses to be caged. The ego cannot bear that. It wants guarantees. It wants to sign a contract with eternity. But eternity does not sign contracts, it dances. And so, before awakening, love is often a performance, a grand stage upon which two egos play the roles of lover and beloved. Each fears that if they stop acting, the curtain will fall and the audience will leave. But awakening comes as that quiet moment backstage when you realize the play was never necessary and that the love you were pretending to create was already the atmosphere in which everything exists. You see, when you love someone as a possession, you are really in love with the idea of them, the concept that serves your story. But when you awaken, the story itself begins to crumble. The old definitions of mine and yours, giver and receiver, start to blur. And that, at first, feels terribly unsettling, because if love isn't about getting something, then what on earth is it about? This is where most people feel lost after awakening. They no longer know how to love, because their old method, clinging, defining, possessing, has collapsed. But don't be alarmed. This is not the end of love. It is the end of the ego's imitation of it, because what is coming next, what always follows the death of the false lover, is the birth of love itself. Love without an owner, love without a name. And that, my friends, is the moment when the collapse begins, the collapse not of the world, but of the illusion of you and the other. You see, awakening does something terribly inconvenient to our old idea of love. It removes the one who was doing the loving. Now that sounds strange, doesn't it? Because for so long, we've been convinced that love requires two, a subject and an object, a lover and the loved. Without that polarity, we think the whole show must collapse. But that's exactly what awakening reveals. The collapse is the show. When consciousness begins to see through its disguises, the boundaries that once seemed so solid start to melt. The I that loved and the you that was loved begin to dissolve into the same current. It's as if two waves suddenly realized they were never separate in the first place, merely movements of the same ocean, curling toward one another in an elaborate, beautiful gesture of play. And when this happens, something extraordinary takes place. The ordinary machinery of romance, desire, pursuit, possession, jealousy loses its fuel. The sense of lack, which once drove the whole affair, disappears. The fire that once burned with need transforms into a softer, steadier warmth, not directed at anyone, but radiating through everything. This is often misunderstood. People imagine that enlightenment makes you cold or detached, like a monk sitting in some remote cave, immune to human affection. But quite the contrary, you become capable of a deeper intimacy, because there's no longer a wall between you and the other. There's no longer a you standing apart, trying to manage or protect itself. You see, the problem with the old kind of love was that it was always strategic. It was love with an agenda, to keep, to secure, to control, to repeat. It was love with conditions: I love you if, or I love you because. But awakening strips away those clauses until there's only one left: I love, period. And in that moment, the lover and the loved collapse into one experience, love loving itself. But this collapse can feel terrifying at first. It feels like death, and in a sense, it is. It's the death of the separate self, the character who believed it could own love, manage love, be worthy or unworthy of love. That character dissolves, and what remains is boundless, directionless affection. So, at first, there's confusion. The mind doesn't know how to handle a love that has no object, no anchor, no opposite. It asks, whom am I loving? Where do I put this? And the answer comes, softly but unavoidably, everywhere. You start to see that the love you thought was a personal exchange has always been the very fabric of existence. The universe loving itself through you, as you, in countless forms. Now, to the ego, that sounds like a loss, because the ego thrives on particularity. It wants to say, that one, mine. It craves the spotlight, the exclusivity, the story. But to the awakened heart, this collapse is liberation. It's as if a prisoner realizes the walls of his cell were made of smoke all along. When you no longer cling to the identity of the lover, love ceases to be something you do. It becomes what you are. You breathe it like air. You move in it like water. Every encounter becomes a meeting with yourself. And yet, this realization can be strangely quiet. There are no fireworks, no trumpets, announcing that the self has dissolved. You might simply be washing the dishes or watching the rain and suddenly sense that everything is touching everything else effortlessly, wordlessly, perfectly. That's why awakened love often feels less dramatic than ordinary love. It lacks the fever, the craving, the chase. But don't mistake that calm for emptiness. It is fullness beyond measure, a still ocean, vast and alive. And as this realization deepens, a great peace settles in. The endless game of trying to win or keep love ends, because there is nothing outside you to lose. The lover and the loved were never two. They were simply the universe pretending to be divided so that it could experience the joy of reunion. So when you awaken, don't be surprised if your old definitions crumble. Don't mourn the collapse of the lover and the loved. It's not a tragedy. It's a revelation. For in that collapse, you discover that love is not something that happens between people. Love is what people happen within. You see, when the lover and the loved collapse, something very curious remains. There is love, but no one left to love, and no one to be loved. This is what I mean when I say that love, in its purest form, has no object. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't come from anywhere. It's like light. It shines, because that's what light does. It doesn't ask, whom shall I illuminate today? It simply radiates. Now, that can be a difficult thing for the mind to accept. We've been trained since childhood to think of love as a verb with a direction. I love you, you love me, they love each other. But this kind of love, the love that exists only when pointed at something, is always fragile, because its existence depends on the object remaining there, behaving the way we wish. And life, as you may have noticed, refuses to cooperate with our tidy arrangements. But when you awaken, you see that real love does not depend on the presence or behavior of anyone or anything. It is not a relationship, it is a condition of being. It's not something you fall into, it's something you are. To love without an object is to see that everything you encounter is the same life looking back at you from another angle. It's to walk through the world and realize that the tree, the stone, the stranger, the friend, all are ripples on the same pond. The recognition is silent, but it carries an immense tenderness, as if the whole universe were exhaling through you. And so the paradox is this: when you stop looking for love, you find that it was never missing. It was hidden beneath the search itself. When you stop trying to give love or get love, love reveals itself as the very space in which giving and getting take place. This is why enlightened love seems, to the unawakened mind, rather impersonal. People say, but I don't want that cosmic, universal sort of love. I want my love warm and specific and passionate. And there's nothing wrong with that. Life plays all its parts. But what most people don't see is that personal love and universal love are not separate. They're the same ocean expressed in different waves. When you awaken, you don't lose the ability to love a person. You simply stop believing that love belongs to them. Love without an object is not cold or distant. It's infinitely intimate, because when you no longer draw a line between yourself and the world, there's no one left outside to withhold it from. You can't help but love. It's as natural as breathing, as effortless as light reflecting on water. But of course, the mind resists this, because the mind wants control. It says, if I love everything, I'll lose myself. I'll be taken advantage of. I'll be vulnerable. Yes, precisely. For love without an object is vulnerability itself, because it's the end of all defenses. It's the willingness to be seen and to see everything as it is, without commentary, without fear. And in that total exposure, you find a strength that no armor could ever provide. To love without an object is to rest in what I sometimes call the suchness of life. It's to stand before a sunset and not think, I should photograph this, or I must remember this moment, but simply to be the seeing. It's to look into someone's eyes and not calculate what they mean to you or how long they'll stay, but to recognize just for a heartbeat that you were never two to begin with. So love, real love, is not about possession or preference. It's about presence. And presence, once tasted, becomes impossible to lose. For when you truly see that there is no object of love, no subject either, the whole universe is discovered to be the gesture of love itself, the wave forever folding into itself, endlessly expressing, endlessly returning. And then, quite naturally, this recognition begins to ripple into your daily life. The question arises, if love is everywhere, if love is what is, then what becomes of our ordinary human relationships? What happens to romance, to family, to friendship, when the heart no longer clings to names and roles? That's where our journey next takes us, into the meeting point between human love and cosmic love. The place where the infinite tries to fit itself into the finite cup of relationship. You see, this is where the real mischief begins. Because when the boundless love of awakening collides with the little structures of human relationship, there's bound to be a bit of friction, rather like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup. The awakened heart feels an immense, wordless love that seems to include everyone and everything. But human life, bless it, is built upon boundaries and names and faces. We say, this is my friend, that is my partner, those are my children. We draw circles around people and call them ours. And for a time, this works. It gives shape to our story. It allows love to wear a costume, to play the game of intimacy. But after awakening, those boundaries begin to shimmer. You can no longer pretend that the love you feel for one person is truly separate from the love you feel for all. The illusion of exclusivity breaks down. Not because you stop caring, but because caring expands. It's as though the heart has grown too large for its former cage and no longer fits neatly into the roles of husband or wife, lover or friend. This can be unsettling. Some people around you may feel threatened by it. They sense that your love is no longer something they can own, and ownership was half the comfort of the arrangement. You might hear, "You've changed, you're distant, you don't love me the same way." And, in a sense, they're right. You don't. You love more widely, more quietly, more truthfully, and that can be terrifying to those still playing the old game. Because, you see, the world teaches us to measure love by intensity, by drama, by possession, by longing. But cosmic love, awakened love, doesn't compete, doesn't cling, doesn't demand a performance. It is gentle and constant, like gravity. It holds everything together without saying a word. And so you may find that after awakening, your relationships change. Some fall away naturally, as leaves in autumn. Others transform into something simpler, freer, less defined. It's not rejection, it's resonance. You begin to orbit those whose frequencies harmonize with this new spaciousness, and drift from those who still need their walls. Now, this can feel lonely at first. You may long for the old warmth, the emotional turbulence that made love feel alive. But gradually you see that turbulence was not love. It was the ego's shadow play, mistaking excitement for depth. When the mind quiets, love loses its noise, but it gains its clarity. You begin to see that love does not need to be mutual to be real. Whether the other person returns it or not makes no difference to the heart that has stopped keeping accounts. To love without needing reciprocity, that is true abundance. And then something unexpected happens. Human love returns, but transfigured. You can love a partner, a friend, a child, not because they complete you, but because they are you in another form. You can enjoy the play of two without forgetting the ocean that contains them both. Relationship becomes not a bargain, but a mirror, two faces of one awareness meeting in joyful recognition. That is the divine romance. You see, the universe playing hide and seek with itself dividing into lover and beloved just to experience the ecstasy of reunion. And every kiss, every argument, every moment of misunderstanding becomes part of the same dance, the dance of separation and return. When you see this, you stop trying to make love permanent. You stop demanding that it behave. Instead, you allow it to flow, to take the forms it will sometimes tender, sometimes fiery, sometimes gone altogether, knowing that the essence is never lost. Love, in its awakened form, is not about finding the right person. It's about recognizing the rightness of this moment, in whatever form it appears. And when you begin to live from that recognition, love ceases to be a quest and becomes a quality of your being. It moves through you like breath, sometimes soft, sometimes fierce, always present. You don't choose whom to love any more than a flower chooses which way to face the sun. And slowly you realize you were never meant to find love. You were meant to become it. And so human love and cosmic love are not in conflict at all. They are one and the same melody, played at different octaves, one personal and fleeting, the other eternal and boundless. And if you can hear both at once, if you can love the person before you while knowing they are the universe wearing a face, then love has finally fulfilled its purpose. You see, The universe loves a game of hide and seek. It hides from itself in 10,000 forms, in stars and rivers, in trees and faces, and then delights in discovering itself again. And this game, my friends, is what we call relationship. Every time two beings meet, the cosmos is looking at itself from two different angles, pretending for a moment that they are separate, so that the joy of reunion can be felt anew. And love is the laughter of that recognition. Ah, it was you all along. But here's the thing. When we forget that it's a game, the play becomes suffering. When we take the masks too seriously, when we say, I am only this person, and you are only that person, we turn a divine dance into a tug of war. Now, the beauty of awakening is that it lets you remember the play while still playing. You don't have to renounce relationship. You simply stop mistaking the mask for the face. You see that your partner, your friend, your enemy are all mirrors, mirrors through which consciousness explores its own depths. The ancient Greeks said, know thyself. But you cannot know yourself alone, because there is no yourself without the other. Just as you cannot have up without down, or front without back, the self requires the other as its complement. So when you look into the eyes of someone you love, what you are really seeing is another window of the same awareness gazing back at you. And this is why relationships are not distractions from the spiritual path, they are the path. They reveal everything still hidden in you, every place you cling, every illusion you still serve. If you listen carefully, every argument, every moment of frustration, every surge of desire or jealousy is the universe whispering, look, that too is me. Now, many people think that enlightenment will somehow make them immune to conflict, that the awakened sage never quarrels, never stumbles, never feels pain, but that's not how it works at all. The dance continues only now. You know it's a dance. You step on each other's toes, you laugh, you fall out of rhythm, and then you find it again. You suffer still. But the suffering no longer feels like punishment, it feels like depth. Even your mistakes become steps in the choreography of discovery. Imagine two musicians improvising together. If one insists on controlling the other, the song collapses. But if both listen, really listen, then even the dissonance becomes music. So it is with awakened relationship. Harmony is not the absence of contrast, but the art of including it. You see, the ego used to look at the other and say, you complete me. But awareness looks and says, you reflect me. And that shift makes all the difference. Instead of clinging to the other out of fear of being alone, you engage with them as a mirror, curious, open, playful. And when the mirror changes shape or disappears altogether, you don't panic. You bow. You thank the universe for the reflection, and you move on, because you know the mirror was never separate from the light it reflected. This is the freedom of awakened love. It plays the roles without being trapped in them. You can be a lover, a friend, a parent, a teacher, and fully inhabit those roles, while knowing they are part of the cosmic theater. You can weep sincerely when the curtain falls, yet never forget that the play itself is the point. For in the end, the game of two is the universe's favorite pastime. It's how the infinite gets to explore its own infinity. Every I love you, every quarrel, every goodbye is a moment in which existence gets to taste itself. And so, when you awaken, don't imagine you'll stop dancing. You simply learn new steps, lighter ones, freer ones, steps that move with the rhythm of the cosmos instead of against it. And in that rhythm, you find something more beautiful than control, participation. To love, truly love, is to let life lead. It's to feel the movement of the whole and trust it completely. And when you do, every encounter becomes sacred, every relationship a temple, every glance an echo of eternity saying, here I am again, meeting myself through you. You know, there's a curious thing that often happens when people begin to awaken. They say, Alan, I'm afraid. I feel like I'm losing the spark of life. The thrill, the passion, the intensity, it's all fading away. I used to feel so much, so deeply. Now everything seems quiet. And I smile, because that's exactly what happens when you stop mistaking fireworks for fire. You see, the ego loves drama. It equates aliveness with emotional turbulence. It wants love to be a storm, thunderous, unpredictable, full of highs and lows, because without all that movement, it doesn't know who it is. The ego says, if I'm not desiring, or chasing, or fearing, then am I even alive? But awakening changes the rules of the game. It introduces a stillness that feels foreign to the mind, but utterly natural to the heart. It's as if the noise that once filled the theater suddenly stops. And at first, the silence feels unbearable, but then, as your ears adjust, you realize that the silence is the music you were always missing. People think passion dies after awakening, but it doesn't. It becomes purified. It no longer burns as craving or attachment. It glows as presence. The old passion was about possession. I want you, I need you, I can't live without you. The new passion is about participation. I am this, I am that, I am life loving itself. It's the difference between a flame that consumes and a flame that illuminates. When you're caught in the ego's game, you need constant stimulation. You need the chase, the longing, the endless roller coaster of hope and disappointment, because that turbulence keeps the illusion alive. But when you awaken, the craving machine breaks down. You stop feeding on intensity because you've discovered nourishment in stillness. At first, it feels like loss. You think, I'm not excited anymore. But what's really happening is that you're becoming sane. You've stopped confusing adrenaline for love and anxiety for aliveness. This is why awakened people often appear calm, not because they've lost emotion, but because they're no longer possessed by it. They can still feel deeply, perhaps even more deeply, but their feelings are like clouds in a vast sky. They pass, they change, they dissolve, and the sky remains untouched. You see, real intensity isn't something that happens to you. It's the vividness of being itself. When you taste your tea, you actually taste it. When you listen to music, you actually hear it. When you hold someone, you actually feel the warmth of their skin without the mind rushing ahead to what it means. That's the return of true intensity, not the fever of wanting, but the intimacy of being. It's quieter, subtler, but infinitely richer. The ego will fight this, of course. It will whisper, you're becoming numb. You're losing your fire. But that's only because it doesn't recognize this new kind of flame, one that no longer burns for results. When you no longer seek to own or control, you discover a love that has no agenda. And that, my friends, is the most passionate thing in the world. Because in that freedom, you can finally give yourself completely, not as a desperate self trying to merge with another, but as life pouring itself into life. And paradoxically, when you stop chasing intensity, the world becomes more vivid than ever before. Colors sharpen, silence deepens. A simple gesture, a glance, a breath becomes holy. For the first time, you are not trying to make life exciting, you are simply awake to the excitement of being alive. So if you fear losing intensity, relax. You're not losing anything worth keeping. The fever burns away so that the warmth can remain. You're not losing the song, you're finally hearing it without distortion. And from that quiet center, a new kind of love begins to emerge, one that moves not from desire, but from understanding. And that understanding ripens into something even more profound, something the awakened ones have always spoken of, compassion. You see, when love burns away its fever, what remains is compassion, the cool flame, the steady light. Not the kind of compassion that says I ought to help, or it's my duty to be kind. That's the moral version. And morality, beautiful as it can be, often hides a bit of fear behind its mask. No, True compassion is not something you do. It's what naturally flows when you stop pretending to be separate. When the boundaries of me and you dissolve, kindness ceases to be a virtue and becomes common sense. You don't help others because you're noble. You help because they are you. It's as absurd to ignore their pain as it would be to ignore a splinter in your own finger. And this is why compassion is sometimes misunderstood. People imagine it as soft or sentimental, but in truth it is fierce. It sees through every disguise, every pretense, every story, and says, "Ah, yes, that too is me." It embraces without approval and without condemnation. Doesn't need to fix anything. It understands that all fixing happens naturally when you stop fighting what is. You see, before awakening, we loved in order to feel better. After awakening, we love because we see clearly. And when you see clearly, you can't help but feel tenderness for this whole strange spectacle, for the heroes and villains, the saints and scoundrels, all of them playing their parts in the great unfolding. To love someone compassionately doesn't mean to excuse their pain or overlook their harm. It means to see them through the eyes of understanding, to know that whatever madness they act from is the same confusion you once carried, the same fog of forgetfulness that veils the truth of who we are. You don't condone it. You comprehend it. And comprehension, real comprehension, is the root of forgiveness. You forgive not because you're magnanimous, but because you see that there's nothing left to defend. When the sense of separateness dissolves, who is there to blame? It's all one movement, waves colliding, breaking, merging, dissolving back into the same sea. This is why awakened compassion feels effortless. You don't force yourself to care. You simply can't not. And it extends not only to people, but to everything, to the wind, the stone, the dying leaf, the ant on the windowsill. The whole cosmos becomes family. But this doesn't make you sentimental. It makes you simple. You cry when tears come. You laugh when laughter rises. And in between, you rest in a quiet tenderness that doesn't need to prove itself. True compassion also includes yourself, which for many is the hardest part. Because if you are the whole, then your mistakes, your fears, your little neuroses are also part of the great game. They are not blemishes on your soul, they are patterns in the dance. To hate yourself is to misunderstand the choreography. So you see, the mature face of love is not the lover's yearning or the saint's pity. It's the soft smile of someone who's finally stopped arguing with life. Someone who sees through the drama without trying to escape it. Someone who understands that the pain of others and the pain of self are threads in the same tapestry. Compassion doesn't mean you let everyone trample you. It means you act from clarity instead of reaction. Sometimes compassion is gentle. Sometimes it's firm. Sometimes it says yes. And sometimes it says no. But both are expressions of the same intelligence, the intelligence of love, meeting life exactly as it is. And when compassion ripens fully, something extraordinary happens. You no longer divide the world into those who deserve love and those who don't. You simply recognize that everything is already being held by the same invisible embrace that holds you now. This is the love that cannot be lost, because it was never gained. It is not a feeling that comes and goes, but the ground of being itself, the heartbeat of the universe, pulsing quietly through every form. And as this compassion deepens, the whole world begins to look different. Where once you saw enemies, you now see teachers. Where once you saw obstacles, you see invitations. Where once you saw chaos, you see a dance too vast to understand, but too beautiful to resist. And so compassion becomes not a moral effort, but a kind of laughter, gentle, knowing, and free. You laugh not at others, but at the splendid absurdity of ever having thought there was an other at all. And in that laughter, you begin to glimpse the great secret that compassion is not the end of love's evolution, but its fulfillment, its flowering. From this point onward, Every act, every breath, every glance becomes a quiet expression of that understanding. And that understanding leads us naturally into the next unfolding of this exploration. For when compassion matures, we begin to see love not only in the heart, but in the pattern of existence itself. Love as the very movement of the cosmos. You see, when compassion ripens, something marvelous happens. You begin to see that love was never just a human affair at all. It is not something confined to hearts and relationships. It is the very pulse of existence. It is how the universe moves. Look around you, everywhere. Life is in relationship. The flower opens to the sun, the tides rise and fall with the moon, stars swirl together in galaxies, every atom is dancing with another. You cannot find a single thing in isolation, because nothing exists alone. Everything depends on everything else, like the notes of a symphony, meaningless apart, but miraculous together. This is love, not sentimental love, but the love that is structure itself, the love that expresses itself as gravity, attraction, rhythm, vibration, the love that holds electrons near a nucleus, planets near a star, and you near the ones you call dear. It is the universe's own curiosity about itself. Now, in our ordinary way of thinking, we separate opposites, up and down, light and dark, pleasure and pain. But these pairs are not enemies. They are partners in the same dance. You can't have one without the other, just as you can't clap with one hand. The moment you try to extract only one side of the polarity, only joy, only light, only gain, you tear the dance apart. When you awaken, you see that love includes it all. It loves the laughter and the tears, the birth and the death, the gain and the loss. It doesn't choose one over the other because it knows that each gives meaning to the other. It's the play of contrast that allows the whole to exist. That's why enlightened love feels like freedom, because it's not trying to improve the world, it's celebrating it. It doesn't say, this shouldn't be happening. It says, this is the step we're on in the dance right now. You see, love is not trying to fix the universe. Love is the universe fixing itself in every instant. Each joy, each tragedy, each discovery, each heartbreak, all are part of the great balancing act by which the cosmos learns to see itself more clearly. When you realize this, even the painful parts of life begin to shimmer with a strange beauty, not because you enjoy them, but because you see their necessity, their participation in the wholeness. You begin to sense that every moment, no matter how ordinary or difficult, is part of a vast choreography. Think of waves on the sea. Each one rises and falls, never separate from the ocean that births it. When a wave crashes, the ocean doesn't mourn. It simply becomes another wave. And yet, within each rise and fall, the ocean is loving itself in motion. That's what you are, the universe waving itself into form for a little while. When you breathe, the cosmos breathes. When you laugh, it laughs. When you cry, it cries. And when you see this, you can no longer take your own story so personally. You realize that your joys and sorrows are not yours. They are the weather of existence passing through this particular sky. And that recognition brings a profound peace. You stop demanding that life be only pleasant, and you start marveling at how it manages to be anything at all. You see that every encounter, every ending, every birth and decay is love in disguise, love playing with itself through time. Now, some people hear this and think it sounds cold. How can suffering be love? But that's only because they imagine love as always soft and sweet. Sometimes love roars. Sometimes it destroys in order to renew, just as a forest burns so that new growth can arise. Love sometimes tears apart the old forms so the dance can continue. When you truly see this, you cannot help but laugh. That great cosmic laughter that says, so this is how it goes. It's not the laughter of mockery, but of wonder, the relief of realizing there was never anything wrong, only everything happening. And so the awakened person lives with a certain lightness. They don't float away from the world. They participate fully, but without clinging. They know that the dancer and the dance are not two, that the play of opposites is the heartbeat of existence. And in that knowing, even the simplest act becomes sacred. Making tea, watching clouds, listening to someone speak, all of it glows with the quiet intimacy of the divine playing itself into form. For love, you see, is not an emotion contained in us. We are contained in it. We are its expression, its rhythm, its echo. We are the music of the universe dancing itself into awareness. And once you truly hear that music, you can never again pretend you are just a spectator. You are the melody itself, the eternal song humming softly through every atom, whispering, there was never anything but love, moving, becoming, remembering, and returning to itself. You see, after all these realizations, after the wave has recognized itself as the ocean, after love has been seen as the very dance of existence, there remains the question, what now? Because you still have to wake up in the morning. You still have to feed the cat, pay the bills, listen to your neighbor's endless stories, and catch the bus when it's raining. Enlightenment doesn't excuse you from life. It invites you back into it more fully, more playfully, more awake. For a while, some people think they must leave the world behind, retreat to the mountains or the monastery, as if awakening meant abandoning the marketplace. But that's just another illusion, the ego wearing a halo. True awakening brings you right back to where you began, but with new eyes. The marketplace becomes the monastery. The noise becomes the meditation. The ordinary becomes the miraculous. When you see that you are not apart from the universe, you stop trying to control it. You begin to move with it, to surf, rather than to swim upstream. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means your actions arise naturally, like waves forming on the sea, without strain, without a doer behind them. And so integration is not a task you must perform. It's a recognition you must relax into. Life doesn't need your permission to unfold. It's been doing that long before you showed up. The great discovery is that you are life unfolding. This realization changes everything about how you live. Work ceases to be drudgery. It becomes a form of participation. You're not pushing the world around, you're dancing with it. Even your so-called duties become expressions of love. Washing dishes becomes an act of reverence. Walking down the street becomes a meditation in motion. You begin to see that everything you once thought was in the way is the way. There's no more spiritual life over here and ordinary life over there. It's all one seamless movement of being. And this, my friends, is what I sometimes call the return to the marketplace with open hands. You come back into the world not as a seeker or a savior, but as someone who has stopped resisting the flow. Now, of course, you'll still make mistakes. You'll still lose your temper, forget yourself, stumble into old patterns. That's perfectly all right. Don't turn awakening into a new standard to fail by. Remember, the wave never leaves the ocean. Even when it curls, crashes, or disappears, there's nothing you can do to fall out of being. So the practice is simple. Each time you catch yourself lost in the old story, in worry, judgment, ambition, take a breath. Look around. See what's here, right now. Feel your body, the hum of existence, moving through it. Realize that you are the awareness in which all of this is happening. And in that realization, the whole world returns home again. You see, the great joke is that enlightenment was never something to achieve. It's what was always the case before you started looking for it. It's not a special state. It's the recognition that there are no states apart from this. Right here, right now, this breath, this sound, this thought is it. The divine is not elsewhere. It is precisely what you are experiencing at this moment. And once you see that, life becomes astonishingly simple. You stop arguing with what is. You stop trying to be special. You stop trying to improve the universe. And instead you participate in its ongoing creation with joy. There's an old Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The difference is that now you know who's chopping and who's carrying, and it isn't you. It's the whole universe, disguised as a human, delighting in its own play. So come back to the world. Love your friends, pay your taxes, laugh at yourself, be thoroughly, beautifully human. Because the awakened life is not a retreat from the human condition, it's the flowering of it. It's the discovery that there is no condition apart from the divine. When you move, it's the universe moving. When you speak, it's life speaking to itself. And when you love, it's love recognizing its reflection in another pair of eyes. You don't need to change the world, you only need to see it clearly. And when you do, you'll discover that it was never broken, only disguised. So walk gently, laugh easily, forgive quickly, and live as though the universe were enjoying every moment through you. Because, my dear friend, that's exactly what's happening. You know, there comes a point when words begin to crumble under their own weight. They've taken us as far as they can from the illusion of separateness to the recognition of unity, from the fever of longing to the calm of being. And now they must bow out gracefully, for what remains cannot be spoken. Everything I have said, all these ideas about awakening, about love, about the dance of the universe, are just fingers pointing to the moon. If you become too enchanted with the finger, you'll miss the moonlight that was always shining right there. So perhaps now we should be very quiet, for silence, you see, is not the absence of something, it is the presence of everything. It is in silence that the song of life can finally be heard without distortion. Listen, you can hear it right now, the hum of being, the breath moving in and out, the faint pulse that reminds you that the universe is alive and aware through you. This silence is not blank or empty. It's shimmering, alive, awake. It's the same silence out of which galaxies spin and rivers run and hearts beat. This is what you are, not a name, not a story, not a role to play, but this clear, open awareness in which everything appears. You've never actually been apart from it. You only pretended to be, for the fun of finding your way back. And what a beautiful joke it is to search for what was never lost, to call the ocean by the name of a wave. The great cosmic hide-and-seek ends, and you laugh, not because you've discovered something new, but because you realize it was never hidden. Now, if you try to hold on to this moment, you'll lose it, because the one who tries to hold it is precisely the illusion that dissolves in its light. So instead, let it hold you. Let the silence breathe you. Let love move you. Let life live itself through you. This awareness, this quiet, luminous presence has been here all along. It was here when you were born, here through every joy and sorrow, and it will be here long after your story ends. It is not in time. Time is in it. It is not something you can understand. It is what makes understanding possible. And if you look deeply enough, you'll see that everyone you've ever loved, every experience you've ever had, was this awareness meeting itself in disguise, saying, hello again, through 1,000 forms. So now, perhaps, you can rest. Not the rest of sleep, but the rest of knowing there's nowhere else to go, nothing else to become. You are already home. You have always been home. And when you walk out into the world again, when you hear the birds, the wind, the laughter of a child, the sound of your own footsteps, you will recognize it all as the same song. The song of the unspeakable heart, playing forever, in and as everything. So let the words go. Let the thoughts settle. Let the world be exactly as it is. For in this stillness, before and after every thought, you'll find the truth that every sage, every lover, every creature has always known in its bones. There is no separate self to save. There is only the great breathing of life, endlessly becoming, endlessly returning, and that breathing, that being, that love is what you are. And so we end where we began, in the simple miracle of now. Not knowing, not seeking, not clinging, just being. And if you listen closely, beneath the hum of existence, you might hear the quiet laughter of the universe whispering, "Welcome home."